Good afternoon. So really thrilled to have Joe and Philip from Rakuten Rewards and ThoughtWorks here. Both of them actually run a fairly sophisticated security operations center and team in their respective organizations. So the goal for this particular panel is to hear from them in terms of how they do their jobs, what kind of outcomes are they looking for, what are some key use cases. And then towards the end of this, we'll actually talk about this notion of global intelligence, which is really around setting context that goes beyond context at the industry level and how that actually helps them accelerate findings and and insights into their own security posture, if you will. So just to get us warmed up, so I want a panelist to launch us off. Tell us a little bit about your company and your own role there. So starting with Joe.
I work for Rakuten Rewards. We're a subsidiary of Rakuten in general, which is a company based out of Tokyo. The best way to think of the company is that we're the Amazon of the Pacific Asia Rim. What do? We do everything. We're in banking. We're in books. We're in, for instance, Rakuten Rewards is retail market. So we're a little bit of everything. We're also global in nature. The makeup of our company is unfortunately, it's a little bunch of little fiefdoms. So Rakuten Rewards, for instance, we run our own infrastructure. We're predominantly in AWS. We do have 2 co-locations that we're trying to deprecate and bring offline as time goes on. I don't think we'll quite be there for maybe another 2 to 3 years. But yeah, we're very cloud-centric. And what do we defend at the end of the day? What's our most important asset? Our revenue-generating websites. And so we're e-commerce.
Hi, my name is Philip Duldig. I'm a senior security analyst at ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks is a global software consultancy, agile software consultancy company, software development. Been there for 4 years. Part of the global security team. We have 17 security analysts at ThoughtWorks working on various customer and internal security things. And I lead the security intelligence program. So really leveraging Sumo and our various machine data sources to have an understanding about what's going on in our environment, prevent breaches, and provide visibility and actionable intelligence to the business.
Thank you. So our next topic really is really understand from you guys in terms of what's the overall cloud security model at your respective companies. So basically, what I want to understand from you is really to get us teed off, like what kind of environments are you on at the moment, on-prem versus AWS versus GCP and so on? What kind of security tools are you possibly using at this time? And then tell us a little bit more about how you're using Sumo Logic itself, like what are you feeding into Sumo if you are doing that? What kind of searches or queries might you be running? What sort of insights are you actually looking for? Yeah.
That's a lot of questions.
Yes, I will.
So we just moved into, or we've had presence in Amazon prior to this year, but this year we moved all of our revenue generating systems into Amazon. So this year's push has really been cloud. And then as we're moving into Q4, we batten the hatches down and the end of the year shopping season starts, and we do it in Amazon this year for the first time. So it should be exciting because we're load testing everything and making sure all the components are going to work. Our security infrastructure starts at Akamai, at the CDN layer, and then comes down to our edge systems at Amazon, which would be protected by a WAF. And then behind the WAF, we're starting to get into more indigenous AWS protections, such as the analysis of CloudTrail, analysis of guard duty. We do export VPC flow logs, but we're not importing them today because we don't have actually a great use case for them. But where are we pulling all this data back to? We're pulling it all back to Sumo Logic. We generate email-based alerts. Eventually, we'll also get into Slack, so we'll Slack alerts automatically. And we also pull in addition like Linux logs, Windows logs, Trend Micro deep security logs. Things that we're looking at doing in the very near future are like, say, Okta, Duo, CrowdStrike, So we're pulling in data sources as we're able to write the proper alerts for them, train our internal SOC staff to deal with them, etc. So our SOC staff is 3 here in the United States, and then we have 5 additional in India to enable that 24/7 operation.
Thank you. What about you, Phil?
Sure. So ThoughtWorks has some data centers. We have a couple of data centers. We're primarily multi-cloud, heavy users of AWS and GCP, with some Azure. Hundreds of different accounts, hundreds of AWS accounts for both internal and customer usage. It's a very, very diverse environment. Lots and lots of different platforms and technologies, and the challenge with such a wide range of technologies is how to monitor, how to know what's going on, have that visibility to ensure that the resources configured in these accounts are best practice, not going to get hacked, and Sumo Logic's really pivotal to that because it allows us to aggregate, grab everything together. With so many different accounts, we were very early on into account automation to automatically configure all of the ingestion from, say, AWS. So when a development team wants to get access to an AWS account, their own AWS account, they can request that, and that will be automatically provisioned with all of the log configuration, all of their sources fed into Sumo Logic automatically. We're talking like, guard duty, PPC. I found Amazon config to be very, very useful for ingestion as a snapshot of what an account looks like at a particular time. And having a historical record of that has been incredibly useful, as well as identifying just resources. The ability to, type in an IP address and be able to find exactly which account that, that public IP address is in, bound to which instance, makes being able to react very rapidly.
So it's more like a sort of a cloud catalog or a inventory, resource inventory, that kind of thing. So like what kind of queries or searches or insights are you looking for among all of these data sources? Like what does it look like typically for you?
Sure. I think that I would say that IP address is I probably do more searches for both internal and external IP addresses against our catalog more than anything. Mostly to identify resources and work out the relationships between these resources and other things. We use a lot of scheduled queries, daily reporting on posture, on the state of various things. I especially like the ability to do the time shift in Sumo Logic, as that's very, very useful for building like a delta of what your environment looks like between any day.
So anything surprising that you found using that particular feature in the last month or so that you want to share with the audience?
Sure. It's very useful for finding when a team has stood up infrastructure that maybe they shouldn't have.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
Like it's very interesting to watch the catalog, right, of what's been created, and know really what's going on. Like you may only speak to teams maybe once a week or once a month or something, and you hear that, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be standing up these servers, we're going to be doing these DNS changes in the future sometime, and then having the ability to just have a Delta report straight away the day it happens, and know exactly what's going on these systems, and if there's any need to remediate that or follow up with that, it's right there.
So it's like off policy. I see. And you shut them down? Is that the plan?
We can. We can.
Okay. So Joe, again, focusing on what kind of queries, insights are you looking for?
We run probably around 50 to 60 search alerts at this point, or searches that are real-time searches that effectively turn into alerts. And then we try to, in these alerts, in the email alert, it's a subject line to give as much information about the alert so you don't have to actually dive into the log. There's enough data in the subject that you could probably make a reaction directly from that. And then if you need to dive into the log, there it is. And there's not only the query, but what triggered that query is attached to the alert. Other than that, we do some of our own internal custom dashboards for sharing with typically upper management. It's kind of funny. The dashboards, while useful, most of the meat and potatoes for us is the alerts. And the dashboards that's kind of to show other people that they give them the blinky light factor.
Just to contextualize this a little bit, so maybe in the last 1 week, what's an example of an alert that was particularly worrying for you?
Actually, it came from the GIS system, the guard duty. It was when they pointed out that DNS exfiltration events were rare, and that we had a DNS exfil event. That, granted, we found it to be false positive, but it's never good to find something like that. It scares you. But at the same time, it was a little more comforting that, yes, you're able to detect that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it was a false positive though, so thank God. You know, so.
Hold that thought, we'll get there. So, one general comment and question that I am curious about. On the operations side, I think, as you saw, Kristen's presentation this morning, I think a lot of people have done a good job in terms of at least defining what they're trying to measure. So on the security side, I'm just curious, how do you guys think about how do you measure your teams, the success of your organizations? What kind of metrics do you have a metrics-oriented program?
I don't think we have strong defined metrics. Results from penetration tests are definitely something that we take into as a partial measurement.
Okay.
The ability to reduce false positives,
okay.
Because it just takes time, effort, money to resolve those. And I'd say probably the last one would be, reduce false positives.
What about things like time to resolution?
Well, no, I'm sorry. Reducing the time to triage and determine if an alert is a false positive. If it's not, what's the time that we're taking to get to the point of true analysis? Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. So we definitely have a metrics-driven reporting across the various units. The security team has been challenged by that to come up with good metrics that help evaluate where we are. I think that's an ongoing exercise in finding good and relevant metrics without necessarily being just doing it for the sake of
Yes.
tagging numbers, right? Yeah. A couple of the approaches that I've taken with that is coverage, just general coverage of the infrastructure. How much of the assets out there are tracked in Sumo Logic? Are we able to identify them? Are we able to identify their owners? Are we able to identify where they are, their current state, etc.? Can we rebuild them? Can we, do we have the infrastructure as code for these systems, etc.?
Interesting.
So coverage has been a thing, and one of the ways that I was doing that, really kind of a brute force approach, but I would find every single internal IP address in Sumo Logic.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. So I build, and these queries take a long time to run because it's looking through a lot of data. But we pull out every single private IP and then compare that against inventories and known configurations, and we can build some kind of coverage metric that says how much of what's out there do we know about. That's been pretty cool. The time thing is always interesting, how long is until we detect incidents and things get fixed. That's, I guess, that's kind of manually tracked tickets and whatnot.
I see.
Yeah.
So again, the thread here really is that context is everything. So I mean, pretty much every example that both of you guys talked about, whether it's around visibility into your infrastructure or actually figuring out what's going on in terms of an alert, it feels like you need to augment what these systems are telling you with additional context. So in that vein, the general idea here is there are two types of context, right? If you look at traditional security products out there, most of them really focus on what I would broadly classify as local context. That's things like detecting anomalies in your metrics of some kind, right? So comparing essentially a customer against their own data from the past, whether it's intrusions or vulnerabilities or what have you. Another example of the same thing, outlier detection works similarly. So if you have like 100 machines in infrastructure and you're sort of looking at how they're behaving over time and then figuring out outliers in that. So again, these are all examples of local context. Like the security products and the industry has sort of, beaten these ideas to death. Right? So now the global context is really, I think, unique, and that's our position, but I want to get your perspective in terms of, when does global context matter? So again, global context, the way we're defining it is, given the fact that we have about, 2,000 odd customers and we generally know what's going on among all their applications, given the data footprint they have within Sumo Logic, the guard duty example that we have today is just the starting point. So the point here is, what I want to understand from you guys is, when does it make, like when do you guys make that switch between local context and global context in terms of how it adds value to these outcomes that you're looking for?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because the question was really spurned from the use of the guard duty, the new panel. And so if you look at the high, medium, and critical alerts that's sending you, those are relative to what AWS thinks is bad. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily even map to what your criticality is. Yes. In fact, what they rate as a low, which is an SSH brute force attack, I think is high. Because why is the port open to start with? Yeah. But anyway, but they rate that as a low. But when you shift from local, or what I would call relative to the vendor, mm-hmm. to relative to others, I think you get a level of insight that's much deeper.
Interesting, okay.
And then at the same time, when I go into, say, a management meeting where I'm meeting with people that are above me, and they say, how are things going? Well, that's a hard thing to say in security. Well, we're not breached, so we're doing well. But it's good to be able to show them dashboards that rank us against other companies in similar industries.
Right. Awesome. How about you, Phil?
I would say that there's a lot of noise on the internet, and sometimes it's difficult to know what is just background noise, what is just automated systems and worms just throwing stuff at your infrastructure. And having the global context really does allow you to understand what is noise, what is noise and what is signal. I think that mm-hmm. the global context provides the ability to filter the noise. So if the same junk traffic is being seen across lots and lots of customers, yeah. Not to, maybe it's just there. It's not doing anything. It's just making noise, and enhance the signal. Because if there's something that's really bad out there that's detected, then you can actually it's easy to detect the anomalies, easier to extract value from that signal.
So just to summarize, sounds to me, I think from Joe's perspective, it sounds to me like, not just relying on AWS's internal calculations in terms of what represents an anomaly or an outlier, but adding value by comparing one company against a population of companies definitely seems to make sense. And then your point, lowering the noise, raising the signal. I think that's a very valuable and great way of thinking about it. Now that being said, what about this idea of rare events? One of the things.
I think he had a question.
Sure,
please.
Are either of you using our CrowdStrike, the Sumo CrowdStrike integration? We're going to. It's a little bit of global context also. Yes. We're going to integrate it into our alerts. We have the app installed, but actually the app installation doesn't really mean it. The data is always there, which is sweet. Mm-hmm. Just recently, though, we've started to look at writing a new set of alerts that will integrate the CrowdStrike threat intelligence directly into our alerts, and just to basically increase the fidelity of what we're talking about. So if there is a hit on CrowdStrike, it's likely this is, would raise the criticality of the alert itself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what about rare threats? So in our case, like in the case of the guard duty application itself, one of the things that we spend a lot of time tuning is really this notion of rare threats. Again, our definition, for what it's worth, is a threat that happens on average like less than 0.2% in your findings mix, if you will, right? So in the population of Sumo customers. So has that been useful for you guys? Like, what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful for to be able to prioritize your time on investigations. I've alluded to a lot of noise on the internet. These systems can be throw up a lot of alerts. There can be a lot of detections for things. You end up just chasing nothing, chasing ghosts. And I think that by knowing exactly what is rare, what is anomalous, and what is a high priority is extremely valuable for a resource stretched team.
Also, in security, you should always fear the outlier. And it's weird when something reports you're the outlier.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, wait, what's going on here?
Interesting. Okay. So just to summarize here, sounds like there is a notion of global context that's just comparisons, and then some aspect of rare events. It's again another kind of comparison that's really giving you insights into another type of anomaly or outlier, if you will. Now, I just have a question in terms of what's the altitude? Like, what's the altitude at which you use these kinds of insights? Do you use it as for posture type management, where you're sort of making executive reports, that kind of thing? That's like one level. Versus active, like something that you look at every day for looking for active threats against your infrastructure. How do you guys plan or are using these kinds of insights?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
We'd like to use the findings from the JS in our stand-ups. We have a daily posture assessment stand-up. The security intelligence program has a look at what we're facing that day, what the internet looks like, what's going on, and that's a really good basis to look. We call that a radiator.
Sure. So it's more like a daily planning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, assessment and
awesome.
Posture evaluation. Yeah.
Okay. And how about you, Joe?
I would agree with that assessment, as well as a great place to start a conversation with management. And yes, I'd like to see it go into additional data sources other than guard duty. It would make it would be great to see an ecosystem of inputs that are all using the similar.
Awesome. So actually, that was my next question. So where would you like more insights? Like what additional data sources would you consider? What additional applications would you like us to go after?
Obviously, CloudTrail, but the problem is with guard duty, it's already a basket of different log sources. So you have several bases covered there. Obviously, any type of endpoint protection suite to pull their logs in and run the same. Because here's the thing: if you have Trend Micro antivirus being compared at one company to, say, CrowdStrike, and then they're seeing, okay, what if we took those two data sets, integrated them also with guard duty, so now we're creating an image of like maybe a worm spreading throughout the net? Well, maybe one vendor's endpoint protection suite is being more effective at that point. You would see that showing up in these logs or comparisons. It would be. You could probably sell that data, by the way. Anyway,
I see. Okay. So that's more like an efficacy against different vendors.
Yeah, you have a point of comparison here that's pretty deep.
I see.
So.
And you, Phil?
Yeah, I would say the two areas I'd be really interested in are basically endpoint, so malware detection. Again, would be really interesting to see what it's like across the industry and the efficacy of different products. That would help evaluate what we should be doing with endpoint. And IDP, like authentication systems. I think I'd really like to see some like the same style of global context to authentication systems. We use Okta at ThoughtWorks, and that is a very, very nice data source. We feed that into Sumo and look for things, but having a global context on that, I think, would be very, very valuable.
Awesome.
Identify rare events and, if something's going on across multiple customers who are all using, say, Okta or something like that.
Yeah, who's brute forcing Okta globally?
Exactly.
Interesting.
Okay. Awesome. So I believe this is the end of the formal discussion. So do you want to open up for the audience questions if you want? Please. Thank you.
Any questions?
Are either of you using like the audit index to track the number of alerts that you're getting and different alerts? Like,
Yes,
do you
yes
keep
we
stats
do.
on that?
But I've used it in the past to do, and this kind of goes to, I'd really like to have a tag that I can put on an event that indicates false positive. because all of our major events turn into an alert, which is that, and then that query runs, then we get auditable events out of that. I would like to add data to that, but currently the events, as we discussed, they're unmutable for obvious reasons. So it's kind of on the wish list for now. But yeah, I've looked into it. Yeah. The SIM looked interesting because there's case management associated with a set of events. That might get us there, but the SIM isn't out yet. So,
Any other questions?
I guess with some of my customers, what they do is ideally use Jira as a way of kind of assigning those tags and then using that to assign it to the proper, whether it's analyst 1 or analyst 2, and using that as a way of kind of triaging and assigning that.
As soon as I get down to less than 200 false positives a day, then we'll start doing that. But yeah, I totally agree. We could just trigger a Jira ticket build or something like that. Right now I have too many false positives to generate a ticket off of everything. But then I kind of wanted the false positive tag on a record, because then I could write different reports around those as well and show those to management and basically prove why we cost so much.
Oh, there's a question in the back from Nick.
Hello. So, as the question about the quality of the comparison, I would like to know how concerned are you guys with the target you're comparing against? For example, are you concerned with whether their company size is similar to yours, or whether they are in a similar industry as you? That kind of thing.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. In fact, it would be interesting if there would be buckets or industries that you're comparing against, maybe a dashboards that break that out. By the way, I didn't know they were using this data until recently, so I was a little surprised. But yeah, it is a little bit of a concern about how applicable the information truly is. I mean, since I'm an e-commerce platform company, I would rather be compared to other e-commerce players versus maybe it's an energy company and their major issue would be SCADA or IoT networks. I don't think that's a good apples to apples comparison for our company. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's I mean, there is a sense of we're all on the internet, so we're all exposed to potentially the same bad actors that want to cause trouble. However, it's that context of the kinds of resources and the kinds of services you offer that do make that comparison quite difficult. I would say that there would definitely be value to us if we could, say, compare ourselves against other consulting or software development companies, because they're more likely to have a similar resource, like similar infrastructure to what we have.
Yeah. So as a product manager for this thing, just to add a little bit, yes, this came up during the feedback cycle with you guys. Just to add a little bit of color there. So the problem is we're trying to avoid using any identifiable context.
Right.
So there is that privacy concern. That's there, in general, but more practically for the suggestion that, the question that is being asked, the reason is we run into, when you examine this at the next level of detail, what we find is that it's hard to actually bucket customers based on these external attributes. Like, just to give you an idea, one of our customers is basically a healthcare company, but it's a modern healthcare company that is running some sort of a SaaS application with like IoT sensors and things of that sort. So for them, they don't consider themselves a healthcare company, they think of themselves as a SaaS company, right? So it's an example where if I was to benchmark them against healthcare companies, which is sort of the old school stuff, then they're not being attacked in the same way. And as a result, this type of comparison or benchmarking wouldn't be meaningful in that particular example. That being said, so yes, the general idea of cohorting is absolutely valuable. So what we're looking at is, are there some things that are inferable from the findings itself, which then buckets the customers in a logical way, and then gives you meaningful comparisons. So that's really sort of the direction in which we're looking at this. And then more importantly, it needs to be generalizable. It's not merely guard duty. You want to be like you guys requested, other data sources as well over time, where the cohorting logic has to work and be resilient to that as well. I believe we're out of time, so I do want to thank the panelists here. Thank you so much. So again, several reasons here. So you guys helped us out. You guys helped us out with the Global Intelligence Service itself. You participated today, and extremely valuable insights. And you will be hearing from me as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So much. Thank you.